Hi, I'm Mr. Sappy, and this is Sappy House. Welcome back. I hope you've had an amazing week. I'm really excited to get into today's subject. The title of today's conversation is called Slow and Sure. A lot of my life, I have been a very urgent person. Urgency stemming from lack. Going into relationships and conversations or even situations and making decisions based off of urgency because I didn't think I was enough and I didn't have enough self-value to be able to wait and have patience. And one thing that I've really learned over the past couple of years is learning to be slow, learning to be steady, learning to be patient, learning to have self-control. And that takes time. I think we live in a world of urgency. I think everywhere around us, it's urgent. If you don't do this, then you're not going to get this. And if you don't get this, then you're going to be screwed. We're fed urgency all day, every day. The quick hits. And I just don't think it's the life of us. I think if we can find some peace and some trust in something bigger, then urgency won't rule our world. I like to add names to things I'm talking about, so we'll call it Mr. Rush and Mrs. Urgency. Always in a rush, always having to figure things out, always having to maneuver, always having to make sure that we're going to survive. It's this life lived from the amygdala, if I'm getting scientific on you, which I'm not scientific. It's survival. It's a belief system and a spirit that's taught rush and urgency. It's a lack of peace. It's a lack of knowing that there's an abundance within you. Why do we live life out of lack? Well, it's a belief from our good friend, Mr. Fear, who makes us feel like if we don't have what we think we need in this moment, and if we don't make this decision right now, and if we don't do this or do that, then we will be left with nothing. Lies. What Mr. Fear doesn't want us to know is that we actually are full of abundance. As we talked about what Sappy meant, we are the branch, and something bigger is the root system and the vine. And all the abundance comes from that. And we live our life in the family of Mr. Rush and Mrs. Urgent. And we hope that if this will just work out, then maybe, just maybe, I can feel some peace. Urgency and rush, they're such good liars. And it comes from a place of a lack of value. It comes from a place of a lack of knowing ourselves and knowing where we're from and knowing who we are. And knowing and understanding the source of life. And like I said, it's really hard to navigate that in today's world because everything is in a rush. But that's why we're here at Sappy House, is to slow down. The moments I've probably gained the most clarity are the moments that I rested. The moments that I just let Mr. Rush and Mrs. Urgency talk their heads off and didn't say a word back. I just sat there. Sometimes the best action is no action. Sometimes the best way to beat urgency is to do nothing. And I'm not saying nothing, but you understand what I'm saying. Sometimes we have to choose peace, which in a world and culture of urgency looks like laziness. Sometimes we have to choose peace in a world and culture that worships burnout. Sometimes we have to choose peace in a world and culture that loves the hustler. When we buy into urgency and we let Mrs. Rush or Mr. Rush and Mrs. Urgency take the wheel of our lives, then who's driving? It's Mr. Fear. Fear is literally driving our lives when we buy in to urgency. And we have to realize that these urgent thoughts are coming from a place of, I need to survive, because we believe something that is not true about us and where we come from. You believe you aren't enough. And sometimes the only way to prove to yourself that you are is to do the exact opposite of what urgency is saying. And it makes you feel crazy sometimes, because everyone around you doesn't really understand. That seems like a really good deal. That seems like a really, really great thing that you could do. Take that, do that. But you know deep down it's not for you. Times we leave relationships, we leave places of where we've been for a long time, and we need a refill right then. We can't be at peace with some emptiness inside. And patience is saying, hey, will you just wait a minute? I have some old roots to dig up. And if you'll let me, and if you'll wait, and you'll let time, Father Time, do its work, and you'll stop buying into this urgency and stop trying to fill this space within you with something that's not for you, maybe something beautiful could be birthed here. Life is about patterns. Some of us have lived a life of urgency, and we find this temporary comfort. We find this, we buy into that urgency, we find the temporary comfort, then it's gone, and then literally we do the same thing. I've done it a million times. And there has to be a breaking point, and there has to be an awareness point of you understanding that this is what you're doing. You're letting those urgent thoughts run you and drive you. And I want you to sit back and relax and know that you are abundant. You're a Sappy of hearts. You hold the cards. Everything that you need is within you, and everything that is for you will be for you. And I say that with the caveat, and the caveat being everything that is for you will never miss you and will not pass you by if you listen to patience. If you don't, you'll have some detours, and those detours will teach you lessons. And so either way, you learn the lesson. Either way, you get to where you're supposed to be. But I'm trying to say, hey, that urgency that you feel, that fear that you feel, don't follow that. And it's going to be uncomfortable for a couple weeks or a couple months. Don't follow that urgency because your intentions aren't pure. When you do that, you're doing something out of fear and not from a place of love. And that's what happens when we buy into urgency. That's what happens when we buy into rush. That's what happens when we don't take our time. The most beautiful things and the authentic road and building what's for you and who you are and why you're here on this earth takes time. It takes growth. It takes watering. We live in a quick fix world. We live in a place where instant grow. What is true and what is authentic and what is honest takes time. And that means you have to become okay with the empty space inside that you really want to fill with urgency. Because really it's not empty, it's just in its infancy. What is for you is in its infancy. It's not empty. Leave it room to grow. Leave it room to become what it's supposed to be within you. And don't let urgency, the weeds of urgency, come in and steal what's for you. Protect your soil. And so I'm here to tell you today, do not buy in to Mr. Fear and his little minions, Mr. Urgency and Mrs. Rush. You are not in a rush, and the pressure is off, and you can take a big, deep breath. Things might not be looking so bright. It's just Mr. Rush and Miss Urgency trying to steal your attention from what's really true. Don't take the silver when there's gold. Don't undervalue yourself because it would make you feel more comfortable to take a little temporary value right now. Follow the uncomfort. Patience is uncomfortable. A life of authenticity is uncomfortable for a time, but then you learn to navigate that sea. You learn to toil that field and to plant. And so don't listen to urgency anymore. You're not out of time. Who told you that? Those aren't your thoughts. You're right on time. And you have a sappy spirit within you that gives you gut feelings and goosebumps, that has a pure intention, that tells you what's for you and what's not for you. And sometimes when urgency is involved and a little bit of doubt's involved and you're having to navigate through that in the moment, yeah, it's a little bit hard to make that decision, but you know what to do. You know what's for you and you know what's not for you. You know what's a temporary fix. You know what's you just being urgent and wanting to fill a void. And so lean into patience. Lean into slowing down. I know we all live on this planet together, but we don't have to live by the rules of this planet. We don't have to go so fast. We don't have to prove our point. We don't have to prove our worth. It's another reason we're urgent. When we buy into urgency, our intentions are off. And when I say buy into urgency, I'm not saying that you can't have urgent thoughts, because that's normal. I have them all the time. I have doubtful thoughts and urgent thoughts all the time, but I just don't buy them. I don't buy that bluff. And I want you to know that you don't have to buy that bluff either, and that you can live in harmony and peace with the flow of your path, and that what is for you will not miss, and that what is for you, because it's so big and because it's so beautiful, is going to take some time, and it's going to take some space. So will you give yourself and that dream, time and space, and trust that in the meantime, as it's all coming together, you're not going to just survive. You're going to thrive, because things are going to work out in the present too. When you buy into patience, things work out. When you buy into urgency, they look good for a minute, and then they start to taste like crap. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.